This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
According to the Iraqi Ministries of Defense, Interior and Health, August was the bloodiest month in Iraq in 1 year. More than 456 people, including 339 civilians and 63 policemen and soldiers, were killed. 1,750 others were injured. The number of victims is high due to the attacks of Black Wednesday, when the Foreign and Finance Ministries were attacked, killing 95 people and injuring more than 600. These attacks were the reason behind the deteriorating relations between Syria and Iraq. Neighboring countries, including Turkey, have been mediating between the two. However, the attempted mediation efforts by the Turkish Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoglu did not cool down the verbal sparring between the two sides. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad described the accusations that his country was providing refuge to the perpetrators as immoral. He reiterated his demands that Baghdad provide evidence supporting its claims. We leave you with Intisar Yunus from Damascus.
Despite the intensive diplomacy in Damascus for the past 2 days to mediate between Syria and Iraq, tensions between the two countries in the aftermath of Bloody Wednesday in Baghdad remain the lead news in Syria. Al-Assad talked about the Iraqi accusations against Damascus during a meeting with the Cypriot president.
Syria is accused of killing Iraqis, and we know that it provides shelter to 1.2 million Iraqi refugees. Of course, this is our duty. These accusations are, in short, immoral. Syria is keen on the lives of Iraqi people as much as it is keen on the interests, blood, and lives of Syrian people.
It seems that the Syrian-Iraqi crisis needed an urgent Turkish intervention. After a quick visit to Baghdad, the Turkish Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoglu discussed with Assad relations between Damascus and Baghdad in an attempt to cool down the crisis between them.
Soon after the accusations were officially made by the Iraqi government, we made a direct request from Iraqi officials to send a delegation to Syria with evidence supporting these accusations.
The Syrian-Iraqi relations were spoiled after the Iraqi government made these accusations against Damascus. First of all, the way in which the accusations were made do not comply with the diplomatic norms, and the accusations are totally false. So far, the Iraqi government did not provide the Syrian government with documents, which is the norm when matters like this happen.
The Iranian Foreign Minister Manouchehr Mottaki arrived to Syria on Sunday, also to mediate between the two neighbors and to contain the crisis. The question is, how successful can these regional countries be in trying to mediate between Syria and Iraq, especially when considering that the relations between them are still new and have not developed politically? Intisar Yunus, Dubai Television, Damascus.
Bombing stories in the Salahiya district are ongoing due to the ugly crimes being perpetrated by Takfiris and Ba'athis. The crimes' effects are reflected on the faces of children living in this area, as well as the complete destruction of the most important schools here.
With the new school year approaching, Abnu Ghaswan High School, which was the subject of a terrorist bombing, did not receive any help for reconstruction and remained a tragic picture in front of the students' eyes.
A month before the beginning of a new school year, Utba ibn Ghazwan Girls High School has not begun its reconstruction work. The school was completely destroyed in Wednesday's terrorist attacks. Teachers and staff members sat outside the corridors and aisles to greet the new female students and complete procedures for the graduates. A chemistry teacher exerted a great deal of effort to prevent toxic materials in the school's laboratories from falling in the hands of those unaware of its danger.
All we want is for them and us to work together. The officials came and saw our situation, but none of them came to remove the rubble or lead the reconstruction effort. We don't know which authority is responsible for the reconstruction. None of us know.
Since Wednesday, I have been sorting out the dangerous toxic material. Some were broken and some weren't. I've been working in the labs for a week trying to clean them up, even though I know how dangerous the task is. I did so to make sure that the chemicals are in safe hands.
The property damage to the buildings caused by Wednesday's bombing could be compensated. However, the psychological wounds to the kids and adults alike have not healed. This makes the area empty of kids.
They are psychologically exhausted. One of the girls is so traumatized that she is scared of going out of her room. People in this area are all psychologically tired.
Before the bombing, many of my relatives used to come to the area and visit. But after the bombing, not even one of them would come.
What's the reason for that? Did somebody get hurt?
They are scared and some were injured. Half of them said that they don't want to come to the area anymore.
The dream of returning to the classrooms could be shattered for the students of Utba ibn Ghazwan High School if the officials do not take action to reconstruct this landmark. This school used to be a model example imitated by many other educational institutions.
Joining us directly from Baghdad is Taha Dada, representative of the Iraqi coalition, to talk about the latest terrorist bombings and the involvement of Takfiris and Ba'athis in them. Welcome, Mr. Taha Dada. My question is, what mechanism should the parliament take to activate the legal system in order to try the members of the Ba'athis and Takfiris who were involved in the terrorist attacks, especially considering that the legal system is still limited by some constitutional provisions?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم في البداية أقول حسنا فعلت الحكومة العراقية.
In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. First of all, I want to say that the Iraqi government did the right thing when it demanded to form an international court to try those involved in terrorist attacks that took place on this bloody Wednesday. This tragedy uncovered for us that there are big loopholes in our legislative and judiciary systems. One of these loopholes is that there are more than 200 criminals who are sentenced to death for committing terrorist crimes since 2006, but till now none of them have been executed. The reason for that is because it's a matter that requires a consensus from the Presidential Council. I think that the parliament members should stand by the Iraqi government's side in its demands to hand over the terrorists and form an international court for these cases, as well as fixing the loopholes in the legislative process. This way, justice can play its role in these cases.
رفضت اللجنة الأمنية اليمنية عرضا لعبد الملك الحوثي القائد الميداني.
The Yemeni Security Committee has rejected the ceasefire offer of Abd al-Malik al-Houthi, the commander of the rebels, saying that it brought nothing new. Meanwhile, Sana'a condemned what it called Iranian bias towards Houthi rebels who have been fighting the Yemeni army for the third week. So far, there are no indications that the war is going to be over. The Yemeni Foreign Ministry threatened to take diplomatic measures against Tehran for supporting the Shiite rebels in Sada. In addition, the ministry summoned the Iraqi ambassador to Sana'a, Talal al-Ubaidi, and handed him a protest letter pertaining to statements made by Iraqi officials that were viewed by the Yemeni government as harmful to Yemen.
وللمزيد معنا من صنعاء المحلل السياسي.
For more details, we go to political analyst Dr. Kamal Badani. Doctor, we want to understand why the government refused the Houthis' offer to stop the fighting.
In the name of God, the merciful and most compassionate, as the Yemeni Security Committee has said, the ceasefire initiative by the Houthis has nothing new. In fact, it is a political tactic aimed at undermining the meeting in Jeddah by the Gulf Cooperation Council ministers, who announced beforehand that they will discuss the issue of Saada. It is clear that this ceasefire initiative was not the product of militias or gangs. Rather, it was made by politicians in Tehran.
طيب سابقا كانت الحكومة قدمت عرض وكان
The government has previously made an offer with 6 conditions.
ما الفرق بين أن يقدم الحوثيون عرضا فترفضه الحكومة
What is the difference whether the ceasefire initiative was made by the Houthis or the government and rejected by the other side?
بهذا الشكل
The government conditions were clear. The Houthis must get down from the mountains and hand over their heavy weapons and other things. However, the rebels' ceasefire initiative did not address this point. They only agreed to have the roads opened, which is a normal thing, and the army will do this in the next few hours or days. The clear public support behind the government has made Houthis panic. As I told you, they are not making their decisions, and this was evident by the change in the Houthis' positions. First he said that he will engage the government in a war of attrition, but 4 months later he calls for a ceasefire. These contradictions show that Houthis do not make decisions independently.
Hi, I'm Jamal Dajani. As you may know, we are in the middle of our yearly fundraising drive. This is the one time of year that we raise money specifically for Mosaic. The program you're watching right now is only made possible with your support. Our goal is $200,000. That's how much we need to continue our uncensored reporting through the end of the year. We can only reach this goal if each and every one of you pitch in whatever you can. So when you're done watching this episode, consider making a donation to keep programs like Mosaic alive. Thank you.
The Pakistani military announced that 104 Taliban fighters surrendered to its security forces today in the Kanu area of the Swat Valley province.
In the Barak area of Peshawar, violent clashes have been ongoing since dawn between the military and Taliban fighters.
The Pakistani army said that 4 Taliban fighters were killed in the clashes, including 2 prominent leaders. It also announced that 12 Taliban fighters were injured, 25 others were captured, and 3 Taliban strongholds in the area were destroyed.
The Pakistani army has been undertaking a military campaign to expel Taliban members from the Swat Valley province northwest of the country and other Taliban concentrated areas since April. The campaign has been increasingly intensifying. More people were killed and injured during clashes in different areas in the last 5 days. The Pakistani army released a report about the latest update of the military operations in the Swat Valley, saying that 104 Taliban fighters surrendered in the Kanu area. This military campaign continues in other locations in which Taliban members are suspected of gathering. It appears that the Pakistani authorities are changing their strategies and conducting the operations on different fronts, such as in Khyber province, where another group of armed Taliban fighters were announced to have been killed or captured during the operations in the Yara area. These operations are carried out in numerous locations where armed Taliban fighters are active, especially after the Taliban have repeatedly threatened to launch retaliatory attacks in avenge of the death of their leader, Baitullah Masood.
وفي إطار سعي الجيش الباكستاني لتمشيط كل المنطقة القبلية شمال غربي البلاد.
Within the framework of combing through all the battlegrounds in the northwestern parts of the country, the Pakistani army is pursuing a group called Askarat Islam, which is known for its tight bond with the Taliban. This group is believed to be behind a number of attacks in Khyber province and Peshawar city. The operation in Khyber began 5 days after a suicide bomber struck inside a border checkpoint called Turkam in the province and killed 22 tribal policemen. Most vehicles transporting fuel, food, and military supplies to Western troops in adjacent Afghanistan pass through this checkpoint. The attack on these cargo trucks opened another front that the Pakistani forces did not cover. On Monday, the police said that a group of men who were suspected to be Taliban members set fire to 18 cargo trucks in the border town of Kaiman. These cargo trucks were carrying supplies for the foreign forces in Afghanistan. The war is ongoing in all directions, but it's still too early to tell whether the military has achieved a decisive victory on different fronts.
ومعنا من إسلامباد مراسلنا هناك عبد الرحمن مطر.
Joining us from Islamabad is our correspondent Abdul Rahman Matar. Abdul Rahman, how do you interpret these latest developments on the ground and the surrender of these Taliban fighters?
First of all, I must mention what happened last week. Last week was filled with several events, most important of which was the suicide attack in the town of Mingora, the largest town in the Swat Valley province, as well as another suicide attack in the tribal province of Khyber by the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan. Today, the Pakistani police talked about a major success that was made in the Swat Valley and Khyber province. They talked about the surrender of about 104 Taliban fighters in the Swat Valley and the military operation that was ongoing since this morning in Khyber. The last piece of information that they gave was that the army managed to kill 35 armed tribal men in the province. Of course, all of this information was released by military sources. Maybe the army is trying one way or another to respond to last week's suicide operations, specifically the attacks in Swat and Khyber. And today, the Pakistani military forces talked about the progress, development, and the big success in these two regions.
Thank you, Abdul Rahman Matar from Islamabad.
EU Foreign Policy Chief Javier Solana has held discussions with Lebanese political leaders on the country's role in possible Arab-Israeli peace talks. The meeting also focused on the political stalemate in Lebanon. Solana, who is currently touring the Middle East, is due to present a report to the EU foreign ministers on the current regional situation. This just weeks ahead of the UN General Assembly later this month.
EU Foreign Policy Chief Javier Solana held a round of talks with Lebanese officials in Beirut as part of a broader regional tour. Solana's series of consultations with Arab leaders comes ahead of UN General Assembly sessions in New York, where US President Barack Obama may make an important announcement concerning the Arab-Israeli conflict.
I will have visit all the countries, been in Cairo, I've been in Ramallah, I've been in Damascus, I've been in Israel. I would like to tell you that still I have the hope, and to that we're working very hard to see if we can get an initiative by the time of the General Assembly of the United Nations.
Such an announcement is expected to have a lot more vigor if indications point to the possibility of Arab countries and Israel opening negotiations. But according to Arab leaders, Israeli policies are impeding any such developments, as Lebanese President Michel Sulaiman warned during his meeting with Solana that any settlement that does not guarantee the right of return of Palestinian refugees will not be feasible.
The residents of the Nahr al-Bared refugee camp have expressed resentment over a decision to halt reconstruction works there.
Hundreds of residents from Nahr al-Bared camp in northern Lebanon have staged a sit-in in protest over a government decision to delay reconstruction for a month. The delay could be due to the discovery of ruins in the old camp. The protesters held banners written on them, "No to reconstruction freeze." Reconstruction freeze equals forceful migration.
Whose interest does this delay serve? This will further deepen our suffering. This doesn't serve Palestinian interests. This leaves the Palestinian people hanging up in the air. We know who is behind it and who wrote the memo regarding the ruins at Nahr al-Bared camp. We urge them as an honorable committee to reconsider their decision to delay the reconstruction of the camp.
The speakers also called on the Lebanese government, the Palestinian factions, and the UNRWA to hold a joint meeting in order to agree on a mechanism for the reconstruction of the camp.
Marking the International Day of the Missing, the families of the detainees in Syrian prisons held a sit-in today.
Marking the 26th anniversary of enforced disappearance, the families of the detainees in Syrian prisons held a sit-in inside Al-Iraqiya tent. The protesters said that the promises of the officials are nothing but ink on paper.
To say something is one thing, but to do it is another thing. His Excellency, the President, has not set up a date for us to meet with him. The National Committee has also turned their backs on us. The issue of the detainees was not proposed on the agenda of the Council of Ministers. Sanyura denied any knowledge of the memorandum or its contents. This came during a meeting with him last May. Sanyura then referred us to the Office of the Secretary General of the Council of Ministers, who also denied any knowledge of the memo in question.
The head of Lebanese Committee of the Families of Detainees, Ghazi Ad, said that they have made progress in the formation of the National Committee, which will take over the file of Lebanese detainees in Syrian prisons.
Meanwhile, a Palestinian young man was accused of collaborating with Hezbollah. The man was arrested in August following an investigation by an international criminal division and the Israeli Shabak security agency.
The Israeli General Prosecutor's Office filed charges against Rawi Fouad Sultani, an Arab resident from Al-Tiri in the Triangle region in central occupied Palestine. Sultani is being accused of spying on the Israeli Army Chief of Staff, General Gabi Ashkenazi, and monitoring his movement on behalf of Hezbollah. Sultani was arrested more than 3 weeks ago, but the news of his arrest was not reported due to a gag order in the case. According to the list of charges filed with the Central Court in the city of Beta Tekfa, a Hezbollah activist named Salman Harb, along with another prisoner named Sami, had recruited 23-year-old Sultani during a summer camp in Morocco. Sultani represented the Democratic Coalition at the summer camp. Sultani, who belonged to the same health club as the military chief in the city of Tekfar Saba, was accused of passing information about Ashkenazi to Hezbollah.
The list of charges was exaggerated for political reasons. The time will prove that my son is innocent. My son attends the same health club as Gabi Ashkenazi. He attended a conference in Morocco and bragged there that he knew the army chief of staff. One of the people he met tried to use him. The office of the Israeli Prime Minister claims that Sultani has admitted that after returning to occupied Palestine, he stayed in contact with the man from Hezbollah via emails and on a social networking site.
Israel's battle against corruption and crime marked several major milestones today, with the imprisonment of two former ministers, Avram Herzon and Shlomo Ben-Ezri. At the same time, much-delayed legal proceedings opened against former President Moshe Katsav. IBA's Aaron Viner brings us the details.
Disgraced former finance minister Avram Herzon arrived at the Hermon prison in the north of the country near Kfar Marar, where he will be spending the next 5 years and 5 months of his life. In his political glory days, the Likud-turned-Kadima party member served as the nation's Minister of Communications, Tourism and Finance. He resigned his last post as finance minister following allegations of corruption and was ultimately convicted of stealing nearly 2 million shekels from the National Federation of Workers while serving as its chairman. The former Tel Aviv resident will now share his prison cell with 3 other men sentenced to serve time for drug, criminal, and traffic offenses. It was far more dramatic as former Health and Welfare Minister Shlomo Ben-Izri began his 4-year prison term today. He turned himself into the Masyahu prison near Ramla, where dozens of Shas members and activists, including party chairman Eli Ishai, gathered in a show of support. The former Shas minister was convicted of bribery, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit a crime. He was found guilty of accepting bribes from his friend, contractor Moshe Sela, in exchange for providing Sela with confidential information on foreign workers. Ben-Izri was initially sentenced to 18 months in prison, but following appeal, the Supreme Court tripled that sentence and ordered the 48-year-old rabbi to remain behind bars for a period of 4 years. He will share his cell with up to 6 or 7 fellow inmates. Ben-Izri is being housed in the prison's religious section, holding some 80 Orthodox prisoners who are allowed to study Torah daily. Already in that section is another Shas MK, Ofer Hugi, serving time for forgery and fraud. Previous inmates included 2 other Shas ministers, party founder Aryeh Deri and Yair Levy. Deri served 22 months of a 3-year prison sentence for taking $155,000 in bribes while serving as the nation's Minister of the Interior. The prison service has vowed to treat its newest inmates, Hirshson and Ben-Izri, like all the others. Both former ministers are serving their time in minimum security facilities and will first be allowed to see their families in 2 weeks' time. However, former political friends in the Knesset are permitted visitation upon demand. Both prisoners will receive monthly stipends of 1,400 shekels and will be allowed their first vacations from prison after completing 1/4 of their sentences.
Get more news about the Middle East online at linktv.org/Mosaic. The Mosaic webpage offers a complete archive of Mosaic programs, program transcripts, the Mosaic video podcast, and the Mosaic Intelligence Report, a weekly analysis of the hottest stories from the Middle East. The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.